No one noticed him at first, and that was exactly how it began. In Raventon, power never announced itself. It didn't wear crowns or raise its voice. It moved quietly, behind glass walls and closed doors, in rooms where decisions were made with half smiles and unfinished sentences. The city rewarded those who knew how to hide their intentions and punished those who revealed them too soon. His name was Adrian Cole, and invisibility was his first advantage. At 22, Adrian worked at the lowest level of the Virex Consortium, a political and financial empire that shaped elections, crushed competitors, and rewrote futures without ever appearing on the front page. He was a junior clerk, replaceable on paper, forgettable in person. People looked through him as if he were part of the furniture. Adrian never corrected them. He had grown up poor, in a place where explaining yourself invited trouble and silence was survival. He learned early that the loud were noticed first and buried first. The quiet ones lasted. On his first week, his supervisor, Marcus Vale, leaned against his desk and laughed. Marcus was tall, sharp-suited, and cruel in a way that felt casual, effortless. "If you want to survive here," Marcus said, "you need to speak. Silence makes you weak." Adrian nodded politely. He never took the advice. In meetings, others competed to be heard. They revealed their ideas, their ambitions, their fears, all dressed up as confidence. Adrian listened. He watched who interrupted whom, who avoided eye contact when numbers were mentioned, who smiled too quickly when praised. While others chased attention, Adrian collected patterns. Every night he wrote in a small black notebook. Not plans, not dreams, observations. Marcus spoke boldly but panicked when data contradicted him. Elena, the strategist, pretended to be emotionless but craved validation. Victor Hale, the senior executive, never spoke first and never needed to. When Victor leaned back, the room leaned with him. Adrian wrote one line again and again, as if engraving it into his mind. People always reveal themselves. You just have to let them talk. 3 months later, the real test came. A major investment collapsed overnight, wiping out millions. Panic spread through Virex like fire through dry grass. Meetings turned into trials. Blame became currency. Everyone rushed to explain themselves before they were accused. Adrian sat quietly at the edge of the table. Marcus slammed his hand down and began listing excuses. Elena defended her projections with rehearsed confidence. Others spoke too much, too fast, desperate to be seen as innocent. Then Marcus turned to Adrian. "You," he said sharply, "you've been quiet. What do you think happened?" The room fell silent. This was the moment that destroyed most people, the moment where saying the wrong thing, or too much, ended careers. Adrian paused. "I don't know enough yet," he said calmly. Marcus laughed. "Then why are you even here?" Adrian met his eyes, unshaken. "To notice what others miss." No one responded. The meeting moved on. Later that day, Adrian was not blamed, he was not praised, he was remembered. That night, an old man stopped him near the elevator. Sebastian Rowe looked like he didn't belong in Virex anymore. Gray hair, slow movements, clothes slightly out of fashion. People passed him without recognition. Some assumed he was retired but forgot to leave. "You handled that well," Sebastian said. Adrian waited. "You didn't defend yourself," Sebastian continued. "That tells me you understand something." Adrian finally spoke. "What's that?" Sebastian smiled faintly. "That explainings are traps." They began talking after hours, in empty offices where the city lights reflected off dark glass. Sebastian never raised his voice. He never rushed a sentence. He spoke as if time belonged to him. "Power," Sebastian said one night, "is not about force. It's about information and restraint." Adrian listened. "The most dangerous people," Sebastian continued, "are not the ones with plans. They're the ones whose plans you never see." Adrian asked him once why he stayed at Virex if he was no longer important. Sebastian looked at him carefully. I stay because I still observe, and observation is never useless. Weeks turned into months. Adrian's role didn't change on paper, but his influence did. People began coming to him quietly, asking small questions, sharing concerns. He became a safe place to speak. Trust came easily to him, and he learned that trust was not loyalty, it was carelessness. People confessed to those they trusted. They revealed frustrations, ambitions, grudges. Adrian listened. He never shared his own. Sebastian gave him one rule and repeated it until it became instinct. Never reveal your final move, he said. Not to enemies, not to allies, especially not to friends. Why especially friends? Adrian asked. Because friends feel entitled to your truth, and entitlement is dangerous. Adrian took the rule seriously. He declined promotions that came too quickly. He avoided being seen as a threat. He let others step ahead of him while quietly learning their weaknesses. One evening, Sebastian's chair was empty. The next day, Adrian learned Sebastian had resigned without explanation. No farewell, no announcement. Only absence. A week later, Marcus was promoted, and Adrian understood something unsettling. Sebastian had not disappeared. He had moved, and whatever his final move was, no one had seen it coming. Adrian closed his notebook that night and wrote one last line on a fresh page. The game is not won by those who move first, but by those whose last move is invisible. The silence Sebastian left behind changed the air inside Virex. People didn't talk about his departure. They avoided it, as if mentioning his name might expose something fragile. His office was cleared within a day. No farewell email, no explanation, just absence, clean and surgical. Adrian noticed who became nervous afterward. Marcus walked louder through the halls. Elena spoke faster in meetings. Victor Hale watched more than he spoke, which meant he was already adjusting the board. Adrian said nothing. Sebastian's disappearance wasn't an ending, it was a signal. Within weeks, Marcus's promotion reshaped the hierarchy. He was given control over a new strategic division, one that quietly decided which projects lived and which were buried. On paper, it was growth. In reality, it was power consolidation. Marcus began to enjoy being seen. He called more meetings, he spoke longer, he made sure everyone knew which decisions carried his name. He believed visibility was dominance. Adrian watched him make the oldest mistake. People reveal more when they feel safe. They reveal everything when they feel powerful. Marcus started confiding in Adrian late at night after others had left. He complained about pressure from above, about Victor's silence, about enemies he suspected but couldn't identify. "You're the only one who actually listens," Marcus said once, pouring himself a drink from the office bar. Adrian nodded. Listening was not agreement, it was extraction. Marcus talked about future moves, about how he planned to sideline Elena, about how Victor was old and cautious and would eventually step aside. He never asked Adrian what he wanted. That was his second mistake. At the same time, Elena approached Adrian from a different angle. She was sharp enough to sense danger, but emotional enough to miscalculate it. "I don't trust Marcus," she said quietly in the corridor one evening. "He's moving too fast." Adrian didn't respond immediately. "I think he's setting me up," she continued. "If anything goes wrong, it'll be on my projections." Adrian looked at her calmly. "What makes you think that?" She hesitated, then spoke too much. She told him about private messages, subtle exclusions, meetings she was no longer invited to. She told him what she planned to do next, how she would confront Marcus, how she would protect herself. She revealed her final move. Adrian never did. Instead, he became the space where everyone unloaded their fears. Marcus trusted him. Elena relied on him. Junior analysts came to him for guidance. Senior staff spoke freely around him, assuming his silence meant insignificance. Adrian began to see the board clearly. He noticed how Victor Hale observed without interfering, how he let others destroy each other before stepping in. He noticed which projects Victor quietly supported and which he let fail. Victor was waiting. Adrian decided not to rush. Then came the breach. An internal document leaked to the press, one that exposed Virex's involvement in manipulating a regional election. It wasn't complete enough to destroy the company, but it was sharp enough to wound. Panic returned, sharper than before. Emergency meetings were called, lawyers filled the halls, executives whispered instead of shouting. Everyone searched for a culprit. Marcus was furious. "This came from inside," he snapped, pacing the room. "Someone's playing games." His eyes landed on Elena. Elena noticed. Adrian noticed both. An investigation was launched. Access logs were reviewed. Emails were dissected. Names floated quietly, then sank. Elena was called in first. She walked out pale, shaken, defensive. "I think they're blaming me," she whispered to Adrian later. "I didn't do this. You know that." Adrian looked at her steadily. "What did you tell them?" She swallowed. "Everything." Adrian felt nothing. That night, Marcus called Adrian into his office. "You've been loyal," Marcus said, leaning back. "I need someone I can trust." Adrian waited. "I think Elena leaked the document. She's unstable, ambitious, reckless." Marcus slid a folder across the desk. "I want you to help me prove it." Adrian opened the folder slowly. Inside were partial logs, selected messages, enough to suggest guilt, not enough to confirm. "You want me to connect the dots," Adrian said calmly. Marcus smiled. "I want you to finish the picture." Adrian understood the offer. This was how power tested loyalty. This was how traps were set. He closed the folder. "I'll look into it," Adrian said. Marcus relaxed. "I knew I could count on you." Adrian left the office and didn't go home. He went to Sebastian's old floor. The lights were off, but the security still worked. Adrian had learned the codes months ago, quietly, patiently. Sebastian's office was empty, but not untouched. Adrian searched carefully, methodically. Behind a loose panel in the desk, he found a thin drive. He already knew what it contained. Sebastian hadn't vanished. He had planted a seed. The drive held complete records, transactions, communications, strategic decisions, not just about the election manipulation, but about everything. Years of quiet control mapped into data, including Marcus, including Victor, including names that had never appeared in public. Sebastian's final move was never about survival. It was about leverage. Adrian didn't copy the files. He memorized their structure. Over the next few days, Adrian moved carefully. He spoke just enough to Marcus to confirm suspicions. He reassured Elena without promising protection. He watched Victor closely, noticing how the man never once asked who was responsible. Victor already knew the truth. The board met behind closed doors. Elena was suspended pending investigation. Marcus stood taller than ever. Adrian remained invisible. Then Victor called Adrian into his office. The room was quiet, no assistants, no files on the desk. "You're very good at not being seen," Victor said. Adrian said nothing. "That's rare and useful." Victor studied him. "Tell me, do you think Elena leaked the document?" Adrian paused, then spoke carefully. "I think the leak was inevitable." Victor smiled faintly. "That's not an answer." "It's the only honest one," Adrian replied. Victor leaned back. "Marcus thinks he's winning." Adrian met his gaze. "Is he?" Victor's smile disappeared. For the first time, Adrian saw uncertainty in him. Dismissed him without another word. That night, Elena resigned. Her farewell email was emotional, defensive, full of explanations. Adrian deleted it without replying. 2 days later, Marcus announced a major restructuring. He stood in front of the staff, confident, triumphant. He believed the board was behind him. He believed the threat was gone.
He believed he had seen the final move. Adrian watched from the back of the room, calm and silent. He had not made a move yet. He was still letting others play theirs. And somewhere far from Raventown, Sebastian Rowe watched the city lights from a different window, knowing the board had shifted exactly as planned. The final move was still invisible, and Adrian was finally ready to make it.
The restructuring announcement changed everything without changing anything at all. Desks moved, titles shifted, new hierarchies appeared on charts, but beneath the surface the tension thickened. People spoke softer, doors closed more often. Everyone sensed that something was wrong, but no one could identify it. Marcus believed he was in control. That belief made him careless. Adrian's role changed slightly, nothing dramatic. A new designation, a broader access badge, quiet inclusion in meetings where he still wasn't expected to speak. Marcus saw it as generosity. Victor saw it as observation. Adrian saw it as proximity. Marcus began leaning on him more heavily. He shared frustrations, future plans, quiet resentments. He spoke about Victor as if the man were already fading, as if time itself were on Marcus's side. "The board wants decisiveness," Marcus said one night. "Victor is too slow." Adrian listened. "What do you think?" Marcus asked. Adrian waited just long enough to seem thoughtful. "Speed feels powerful," he said, "until it isn't." Marcus laughed. Careful, that almost sounded like advice. Adrian smiled faintly. He had given none. Behind the scenes, Adrian began to apply pressure without ever touching the center. He didn't accuse Marcus. He didn't warn Victor. He didn't defend Elena. Instead, he spoke to analysts, compliance officers, legal teams, never directly, never urgently, just enough to plant questions, just enough to encourage curiosity. Curiosity did the work for him. Files were revisited, decisions were re-examined, old approvals were compared with new outcomes. Patterns emerged slowly, the way cracks form under pressure. Adrian stayed out of sight. One afternoon, Victor called another closed-door meeting. This time, Marcus wasn't invited. The omission was subtle, but Marcus noticed. "So now they're cutting me out?" Marcus snapped later, pacing his office. "After everything I've done?" Adrian remained seated. "Power shifts quietly," he said. "That's usually how you know it's real." Marcus stopped pacing. "You think Victor's behind this?" "I think Victor survives by letting others overextend," Adrian replied. Marcus clenched his jaw. "Then I'll force his hand." That was the third mistake. Marcus began pushing decisions faster, bypassing usual checks. He wanted results that could not be ignored. He wanted proof of his value. Adrian did nothing to stop him. Instead, he documented everything. Not on paper, not in files, in memory. Every shortcut Marcus took, every rule he bent, every name he dropped to intimidate resistance. Meanwhile, Victor said nothing. That silence unnerved Marcus more than open opposition ever could. Then the board requested a performance review of Marcus's division. Routine on the surface, dangerous underneath. Marcus was confident. He prepared presentations filled with numbers and projections. He rehearsed explanations. He planned to dominate the room. The night before the review, he called Adrian. "I need you there," Marcus said. "You know the details better than anyone." Adrian agreed. During the meeting, Marcus spoke with force. He framed risks as necessary aggression. He portrayed resistance as fear. He painted himself as the only one willing to act. The board listened. Victor listened. Then Victor asked one question. Why were compliance protocols bypassed on 3 separate occasions last quarter? Marcus smiled. "Speed," he said. "We couldn't afford delay." Victor nodded slowly. "And who authorized that?"
Marcus hesitated just a fraction of a second. Ultimately, he said, "I did." Victor turned to Adrian. "You were involved in these operations. Is that accurate?" Every eye shifted. This was the moment, the one where most people revealed their final move. Adrian spoke carefully. "I observed the processes," he said. "I didn't authorize them." "Did you raise concerns?" a board member asked. "Yes," Adrian replied. "When?" "In private, where concerns are usually raised." Marcus turned sharply. "That's not true." Adrian met his gaze calmly. "You dismissed them." Silence filled the room. Victor didn't smile. He didn't accuse. He simply let the silence work. The board ended the meeting early. Marcus walked out pale, his confidence cracked. That evening, his access to several systems was quietly restricted. No announcement, no confrontation, just limitation. Marcus called Adrian repeatedly. Adrian didn't answer. The next day, Marcus stormed into Victor's office. The doors stayed closed for over an hour. When they opened, Marcus looked smaller. 2 days later, an internal audit was announced. This time, it wasn't about Elena or the leak. It was about decision-making authority. Marcus was suspended pending review. The office buzzed with rumors. Names were whispered. Alliances shifted. Adrian remained silent. Finally, Victor asked him to stay behind after a meeting. "You could have ended him earlier," Victor said. "Why didn't you?" Adrian considered the question. "Because premature victories attract enemies." Victor studied him carefully. "And now?" "Now," Adrian said, "the board sees what you wanted them to see." Victor nodded. "You understand the game." Adrian didn't respond. That night, he returned to Sebastian's old office again. Not to search, not to take anything, just to sit. Sebastian had once said the final move was not about destruction, but positioning. Adrian understood that now. Marcus wasn't destroyed, he was exposed. Exposure was more permanent. Days later, Marcus was officially removed. His resignation email was short, controlled, empty of explanation. No one defended him. The system moved on. Adrian was offered Marcus's position. He declined. That refusal echoed louder than acceptance ever could. Victor watched him closely after that. The city of Raventon continued its quiet operations. Deals were made, futures were shaped, faces changed. But something fundamental had shifted. Adrian was no longer invisible. He was unreadable. And Victor knew one thing with absolute certainty. Adrian had not revealed his final move.
Victor Hale had ruled Raventon for 20 years without ever looking like he ruled anything at all. That was what made him dangerous. He never chased power. He waited for it to come to him, tired and compromised. He let ambitious men destroy themselves, while he remained still, like a fixed point everyone else moved around. Adrian understood Victor better than anyone else in the building. That was why Victor finally became uneasy. After Marcus's removal, the organization entered a quiet phase. No sudden announcements, no dramatic changes. Stability, carefully performed. To most, it felt like relief. To Victor, it felt like the calm before a misdirection. Adrian had declined Marcus's position, but his influence had expanded anyway. People sought his input without realizing why. Decisions subtly aligned with his quiet suggestions. Outcomes favored his perspective without his name attached to them. Victor noticed patterns, and Victor never ignored patterns. One evening, long after the offices had emptied, Victor asked Adrian to join him for a drink in the private lounge overlooking the city. The glass walls reflected Raventon's lights like a second inverted skyline. "You remind me of Sebastian," Victor said, pouring 2 glasses. Adrian didn't react. "That's not a compliment," Victor added. Adrian accepted the glass. It wasn't meant to be. Victor studied him. "You've done very well by not doing very much." Adrian waited. Marcus was reckless. Elena was emotional. Others were predictable. You are none of those things. Adrian took a slow sip. Predictability is expensive. Victor smiled faintly. So is ambition. The silence between them stretched. "Tell me," Victor said finally, "what do you want?" This was the question Victor used to end games. Everyone eventually answered it. Titles, control, legacy, immunity. Adrian placed the glass down carefully. "I want options." Victor's smile faded slightly. "Everyone says that." "Everyone lies," Adrian replied. "They want certainty. I want flexibility." Victor leaned back. "And how do you plan to get it?" Adrian met his eyes. "By not explaining myself." Victor laughed quietly. "You're careful, but no one is untouchable." Adrian didn't disagree. They parted politely, but both understood something had shifted. The game had narrowed. The board had fewer pieces now. Victor began testing Adrian in small ways. He delayed approvals Adrian quietly depended on. He redirected resources. He watched for reaction. Adrian gave him none. At the same time, Adrian made one subtle change. He stopped listening. Not entirely, just selectively. People noticed. Conversations shortened. Confessions dried up. The space Adrian had provided closed gently, without explanation. And into that silence, something else entered. Doubt. Victor sensed it immediately. A month later, a federal inquiry quietly requested historical documentation from Virex. Not an accusation, not an investigation, a request. Victor had seen that before. It was how institutions warned you before they moved. He called his legal team. They were confident. They always were. Still, Victor felt the weight of something unseen. That night, he opened an old secure drive, one only he and Sebastian had ever known about. He expected reassurance. Instead, he found absence. Files were missing, not deleted, relocated. Victor closed the laptop slowly. Sebastian had once told him that true power was not control, but contingency. Victor understood too late that Sebastian had not retired. He had transferred leverage. Victor summoned Adrian the next morning. This time there were no pleasantries. "You've been very quiet lately," Victor said. "I've learned from the best," Adrian replied. Victor leaned forward. "Sebastian left you something." It wasn't a question. Adrian didn't answer. Victor's voice hardened. "If you think you can use that against me—" "I think nothing," Adrian interrupted gently. "Thinking creates assumptions." Victor stood. "You're playing a dangerous game." Adrian stood as well. "I didn't start the game." They faced each other in silence, the city suspended behind them. Victor finally spoke. "What's your move?" Adrian looked at him calmly. "If you can see it, it isn't final." Victor exhaled slowly. Within days, the inquiry escalated. Not publicly, quietly, precisely. Specific names were requested, specific decisions questioned. Victor responded with measured cooperation. Behind the scenes, the board began distancing itself, not from Victor directly, but from risk. Victor felt the ground shifting beneath him. He reviewed old communications, traced old decisions, followed trails he thought he had buried. Everywhere he looked, he found evidence of foresight. Not Adrian's foresight, Sebastian's. The realization settled heavily. Sebastian had never planned to win. He had planned to ensure no one else could. Victor summoned Sebastian the next morning. This time there were no pleasantries. "I told you never to underestimate the quiet ones."
Victor didn't respond. Instead, he prepared. He arranged a final board session framed as a strategic realignment. He intended to consolidate authority one last time, to force clarity, to expose Adrian if necessary. The meeting was scheduled for Friday. On Thursday night, Adrian met Sebastian for the first time in months. Not in an office, not in the city. They sat in a quiet cafe far from Raventon, unnoticed and ordinary. "You did well," Sebastian said. "I followed the rule," Adrian replied. Sebastian smiled. "No, you understood it." Adrian looked at him. "You could have ended Victor yourself." Sebastian nodded. "Yes, and then what?" Adrian didn't answer. "Power hates vacuums," Sebastian continued. "I wanted evolution, not collapse." Adrian understood. "What happens tomorrow?" Adrian asked. Sebastian stirred his coffee. "Victor will try to force the board's hand." "And me?" Adrian met his eyes. "You will leave." Adrian frowned slightly. "Not run, exit." The distinction mattered. Friday arrived. The boardroom was tense. Victor spoke first, outlining risks, emphasizing unity, warning against internal fragmentation. He spoke well. When Adrian's turn came, he stood calmly. "I won't be staying," Adrian said. The room froze. Victor turned sharply. "What?" "I'm resigning," Adrian continued, "effective immediately." Whispers spread. Victor stared at him. "You think walking away protects you?" Adrian shook his head. "No, it protects you." Silence. Adrian placed a sealed envelope on the table. "This contains everything the inquiry will need to understand the past clearly and the present fairly." Victor's face tightened. "You're threatening us." "I'm preventing escalation," Adrian replied. "Once I leave, the leverage disappears." A board member spoke hesitantly. "What leverage?" Adrian didn't answer. He looked at Victor. "You taught me that power survives by knowing when to stop." Victor understood. If Adrian stayed, the inquiry would deepen. If Adrian left, the files would remain dormant. Victor nodded slowly. The board accepted Adrian's resignation. No applause, no accusations. Adrian walked out of Virex for the last time without looking back. Weeks later, the inquiry closed quietly. No charges, no headlines, just adjustments. Victor remained in place, diminished but intact. Sebastian vanished completely, and Adrian Cole became a ghost. No public role, no visible influence. But occasionally, in other cities, other institutions shifted unexpectedly. Decisions aligned too neatly, conflicts resolved too cleanly. People spoke of an unseen hand. They never spoke Adrian's name, because the final move was never meant to be seen, and nothing could defeat him, because the game ended the moment he chose to disappear.